Hey ENFPs and ENTPs, have you ever wondered where your ideas and your inspiration and your energy and enthusiasm comes from? Because the truth is, ENFPs and ENTPs are known for having a lot of ideas, constantly chasing new projects, thinking about new things they could do with their lives. However, there are times where ENFPs and ENTPs hit the wall and where your inspiration fades and where you find yourself in a situation where you're like, you got nothing. You don't have any ideas anymore. They're gone, and it's like it feels like no matter what you do, it's not going to work out. You're going to be in this position where it's like you feel none of your ideas are good. So why did your ideas turn sour? And what can you do in the times where you can't really find any new cards to play or any new things to do? Well, the first thing you'll have to recognize is that extroverted intuition, the dominant cognitive function of the ENFP and the ENTP personnel type, known for its capacity of pattern recognition, idea generation, and creativity, actually is born from implicit introverted intuition, which means that for Carl Jung, intuition was the function, and introversion and extroversion was the attitude. And when one attitude is pursued, when we take a specific attitude towards intuition and how we should pursue and experience and engage in intuition, the other becomes implicit, which means that in your brain there are two feedback loops happening. One is going forward and one is going backwards. So one is being pushed to the front of your brain, to the top of your attention, and the other one is pushed to the background. And here in this case, extroverted intuition is put to the foreground in the front and where your attention goes, and introverted intuition is pushed to the back. And so it's often something that ENFPs and ENTPs are not really aware of, and something which will constantly impact your ability to draw and generate new ideas. Now, how you can think of introverted intuition, besides the honking in the background, if you can hear that, is that introverted intuition is the context. You could think of introverted intuition as the wizard hat. So imagine you're on a stage and you're doing big tricks for people and you're pulling out all these rabbits from the hat. Extroverted intuition is the rabbit and introverted intuition is the hat, from which you're pulling out all those ideas. Which means, in many ways, introverted intuition operates as the context, or basically the room from which all your observations are drawn using extroverted intuition. And so when you go into a new context or a new situation with introverted intuition, when you're in that kind of a place, extroverted intuition is operating here on full frequency to kind of try to map out what's in this room, what's possible with this room, with all the things that are in this room, right? So what can I do with what is inside this place? So here extroverted intuition is working from a context, and it's working from creating ideas and creating possibilities and spotting patterns from within that context. And here in this case, the context is implicit, which means that it's not something you know and it's not something you're aware of, but it's constantly putting your ideas on a certain trajectory. And so if that context is bad, the ideas that you have and will draw from that are most likely going to be bad too. And if you find that you're constantly looping around and popping around like popcorn in a microwave, but stuck in a microwave and wanting to get out of that microwave, well, you're going to need to learn some important skill which you could consider as context shifting, right? What is context shifting? Context shifting is when you take something that you believe fundamentally to be true about the world or life or about how life is supposed to be, and when you decide to flip it around on its head. Instead of assuming that life is suffering, you assume that life is happiness. And what does that mean? And how would that change the ideas that you draw from that, right? Because we often find introverted intuition in these kinds of philosophical truisms, so these kinds of statements and these kinds of ideas that we draw from things, often things that we can't know and can't say for sure, right? So introverted intuition has this philosophical approach of, saying, this is what life is, this is how we should live our lives, this is how we should conduct ourselves, and this is why we're here, and this is what our future is going to look like. And now, when we think consciously about that, what we're doing is we're constantly challenging ourselves to consider, wait, why am I here? Why do we exist? For what purpose? Where are we going with our lives? What is my future going to look like if I continue like this, right? And where do I want to be in 5 years from now or 10 years from now, right? So knowing where you want to be, knowing where you're going, thinking about these things allows you as an extrovert intuitive to be able to change how you have ideas. It's like changing out the hat. You're only taking out bad ideas from your hat. Well, toss away the hat, take out a new hat, a better hat, and from there you can draw new ideas. Now, the struggles that extrovert intuitives tend to run into when engaging in this process and working with this process, so thinking about, reflecting about life and why they're here and the future and where they want to go with life is, how do I know which future I should go towards, right? If I can think about it, maybe I'll just get confused, because often many operate with the idea that introverted intuition is divergent for the ENFP and extrovert intuition is convergent. So the idea is here that when you are pursuing new possibilities, you're confident, but when you're thinking about why you're pursuing possibilities as an ENFP or ENTP, you get unconfident, you lose confidence, you get scared, worried, anxious, uncertain. And in this, it becomes like almost impossible to make decisions and to change things around and to consider where you want to go with your life and how you want to do things. Well, here you can take a page from the INFJ or INTJ handbook and consider how they do it. Because the truth is, how do INFJs and INTJs engage in this if they do it right? Well, what they do is they do it slowly, right? So often INFJs and INTJs operate from the fact that, you can only have one idea at a time. You can only have one thing at a time. Yes, your ideas can change as you go. Yes, your idea of your future can definitely slowly transform over time, but there can only be one, right? So why do INFJs and INTJs have the rule of one? It's because, they know that, in this introverted intuitive space, there can only be one context. In the extroverted intuitive space, there can be billions, right? So that's the difference between these two functions. The fact that when you engage in introverted intuition, there can only be one, but when you engage in extroverted intuition, there can be billions, right? So here, the reason for making that kind of a distinction is simply to make the process practically manageable and to make sure that you're engaging in this in an honest manner, because introverted intuition is about coherence and consistency. So ideas have to blend together. They cannot contradict each other. So if we're considering on one hand a future where we settle down in a house, and on one hand a future where we travel the world, these two ideas are incompatible, and so there can only be one, right? And that's in some ways why introverted intuitives are so stubborn, right? While they don't change and so on. So when you engage in introverted intuition, you need to facilitate a degree of stubbornness where it's like the first idea that you have has to be the only idea that you allow yourself to have. And yes, you can change that context and work from that over time, but you should not expect any bigger, massive revelations happening, at least not quickly, right? So any form of transformation of perspective or change of thinking has to happen slowly and steady and methodically. So when you're on the process of using extrovert intuition, your dominant function, which you should try to use as often as possible in your life, you can go crazy, you can go nuts, you can just play out and experiment and test and try out different things. But when you're in the process, when you realize that, okay, I've hit the wall, the context that I'm working from, the ideas that I work from, the way I've started to conduct my life is not working out for me and I need a change. Well, in those processes, when you engage in those processes, you need to learn to take it more slowly, more steadily, more consistently. You need to think methodically, okay, what is it especially that I'm feeling? What is it that I'm thinking about? And, what are the things that I take for granted about life at the moment? And why do I take that for granted? And you need to kind of really sit down and work through those things. And yeah, there are some weird things that I think extrovert intuitives find really annoying and very difficult about using introvert intuition. And that's, for example, the idea of one, right? So the idea of one is, I think, what extrovert intuitives probably struggle with the most. How can I settle for just one, and which one should I settle for? And even more annoying is the first one is always the best one, right? So whatever you thought about first was what you were supposed to be thinking about. where you started going after that, that's the distraction, right? So that's how introverted intuitives see it, right? So they see, any things that come and happen afterwards as distractions, and then they rule it out because distractions are not interesting, and then they focus on that first thing that they thought about, because that was the important thing. Why did I have that first association? When I was asked or prompted, think of an animal which has a blue color, you might go to, well, I can think of, what animals do have blue colors. Well, seals are kind of bluish, aren't they? Certain, birds. Okay, no, sorry. Seals were the first association you had, so why did you consider the seal, and what made you think about that? And that's the annoying thing about introverted intuition. It stops there. It's not trying to generate a series of ideas. It's trying to find out what your first association is, and from there, if you can understand that, you can understand what basically the railroad track of your mind is. Because as chaotic as you might be as an ENFP, your mind is following a railroad, right? So it works from a set of ideas and things and hypotheses that you have, right? And the ENFP or ENTP that's able to understand this and is able to work from this and is able to change their context as well as they want it to be and to point them in the right direction, and that person is able to remodel their house and their creative faculties so that they can have incredible ideas that are known, or it's definitely going to bring you to a better tomorrow.